Hello.
Hey guys, we've
We're
got some
back.
good stuff for you tonight.
Yeah, we are. We do. We have a lot of really cool stuff coming at you tonight.
Oh, that's right. And
Um,
we didn't have an episode last week because we dropped the trailer instead, but I'm just going to let you talk about that.
we did. So first of all, what he's referencing, if there's anybody out there that hasn't seen the trailer, there is a trailer on our Facebook page for the upcoming series where we investigated at the Ross house, and the official title for that is called The Battle of Souls. And like I said, the trailer is out there on Facebook. If you haven't seen it yet, uh, go see it. Like as soon as you get off of this episode, go watch it because I think it's pretty cool. I mean, that might be biased because I'm the one that put it together and edited it, but yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I think Christopher agrees. But a little bit about the series because we're really excited to announce that the series will officially be dropping on YouTube this upcoming Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's going to be a 6 episode series with each episode coming out periodically on Sundays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So for the next like 6 weeks, you're going to have a Crooked Path Paranormal episode of the Ross series, Battle of Souls, coming out on YouTube each Sunday. And just a little bit about it without giving anything away. I'm super excited for it. Because it's a pivotal moment in the story that we've been talking about with the 9 shadows and locations that we've been working on for about a year now. Um, it's such a huge pivotal moment in that storyline. Not only that, though, I think honestly the way that the series has sort of went, I think it's something really special compared to what we've put out there before. I think the things that I've learned in the past year as far as editing have really come a long way. And because Christopher, you've seen 4 out of the 6 episodes so far, only because episodes 5 and 6 I'm putting the last little touches on to finish them out. But you've seen episodes 1 through 4, so why don't you just say something from your perspective on that for a second?
The number of things you've done differently in these 4 episodes from what you've done in previous episodes is just mind blowing. And I'm not going to call out any one of those things because I want
Right.
people to experience it in real time like I did. But just noticing one thing after another, like for myself, I guess it's a good thing I was there when it was filmed because I found myself a little bit disconnected from what was happening and just focusing on, oh, he did this and he did this.
Right.
So that was kind of cool. But then, of course, there were the other parts that I don't remember from actually filming it because I wasn't there. So
Right.
much of it I got to watch for the first time, just like all of you will.
It's always a special moment when that gets to when that happens.
I think this is definitely some of the heaviest stuff we've put out there.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would say, even despite that, there were moments where I think our natural humor still managed to really come through.
Oh yeah. There's a again. I won't say it because I I want people to experience this in real time as they're watching it. But there's one sequence in particular where it's a long sequence that I think is not only the funniest thing we've put out there at this point. I agree with you. I think that the way that I was able to do this series, I think it shows a little bit more of our natural personality. I think just overall, as you watch each episode, I think people will sort of see what I mean by that when they watch it, that you really get to see our natural personality shown a little bit more, which I won't say too much more about that, I guess, because I want people to experience it as it comes out. But we're super excited about it. I've definitely put a lot of work into this. I hope people enjoy it as much as we do, because I really think special compared to what we've done before, and I can't wait to see where it goes with it. But yeah, this upcoming Sunday is when it's going to first debut episode 1, and then every Sunday from that point at 12 p.m. Eastern time, those episodes are going to be releasing. So please, as always, check it out. Like, comment. We love comments. Just let us know what you feel. If there's anything that you think is in there that maybe we could even improve on, always let us know. I love constructive criticism, because as we're gaining momentum a little bit here, I just want to keep getting better. I want to do the best that I can for everybody watching. So please let us know. But with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Christopher, who is going to announce our very, very special guest that's going to be joining us tonight. So, Christopher, why don't you take it from there?
Our guest tonight is someone that, when I think back, we first met at a different event at Poasttown Elementary several years ago and didn't really have much time to connect one-on-one. And then sometime later, we were pulled together in a different event in a different space at the old Paulding Jail, which anybody that's ever listened to me talk knows that I've got deep ties to the Paulding Jail. I've had many experiences there. Many important things have come through for me there. That's when tonight's guest and I really were able to reconnect. And it was at a moment when I was coming out of one of the strangest weeks of my life. And she managed to connect directly into that strangeness and to continue the story. So we'll definitely talk about that tonight. But tonight we have psychic portrait artist Angela Boley. She is a fascinating and extremely gifted person. And with that, I'm going to bring her out.
All right.
Hi.
Hey.
Hello. So when I say extremely gifted, it's not even just your psychic abilities, it's your drawings too. I mean, that's a piece of the puzzle that I don't have. I try to draw something and it looks like somebody threw up on a piece of paper. So, I mean, you're a very gifted psychic and you're a very talented artist. And you've managed to take those two things and combine them into something that I feel you've really made a name for yourself with.
I love doing the work, and a long time ago, I first started doing art. I wasn't doing psychic art at first, but I know I had these abilities, and I was looking for an opportunity. Now, when I joined with the paranormal team, what I was finding that spirits would come to me even before I knew we were going to location. They would introduce themselves, kind of give them their story, their background, and I would paint portraits of them. And then when I would go to the location and show up and I'd show them the portrait without being told anything ahead of time, the persons in that home would say, yes, we've seen that apparition here. We see that person here all the time. And the caseworker would do some research and be able to validate that not only what I was getting was correct, but it also matched up the dates and location and so forth. So everything would match up what I was getting, and then also the image I was painting. And presenting that to the people that were in the location, it not only it validated their experiences, it let them know that they weren't crazy, that they were seeing this person still, and that the history is what they turned out to suspect, that this person was still hanging around there long after the prior structure has gone away or has been changed or renovated, and they're still seeing the person there. And of course, it's really healing for both the spirit and for the living person. For most of the time, it's just a misunderstanding between the living and the spirit that's hanging out there. And they just need a clear communication with each other so they can both find peace.
Wow. That's amazing. Just sitting here listening to that, because like I know from like the point of view from everything that Christopher and I have done together, it's interesting to hear that, because that's one of those abilities that I wish I had, because I'm like Christopher, I can't draw at all, and but you can't even see the spirits the way that you guys do, which is just amazing to sit here and listen about. But Christopher, not having the ability to draw, it's interesting sometimes because he typically will let them draw with his hands, so it might be a child spirit and stuff like that. So looking at it from what I've seen in that perspective, it's interesting to hear that side of it where it's so exact on that it's an actual like spirit that you're depicting, that people are able to historically validate that that person was there. It's just so amazing to hear.
And it's an amazing blessing. I'm just honored to be blessed with it. And I did do a portrait recently. There's a young man who was a pilot in the Air Force, and he was a great pilot, very talented. And in his early 20s, passed away in a car accident.
Oh wow.
And I just painted based on his psychic impression of what I got from him. You know, he's very peaceful. He's already crossed over, but he does reach out to other people to validate not only there is life after death, that life continues, but it's spirit, but to also bring healing and comfort to a lot of people. And then I painted his portrait, and towards the end of the portrait, I'm nearly done. Somebody sent me a photograph of him, and you could tell it's the same person, the same color hair, the eyes, the shape of the face, the same uniform. You know it was him. And she even sent me a photo of his gravestone as well, and his memorial. And his personality would come through with a great sense of humor. And I was so honored and so touched to be a part of it. I still have the portrait nearby if you wanted to look at it. But if you go to my Facebook page, you'll actually see side-by-side comparison between the portrait I painted and the photo of
Wow.
the of the person when he was alive. His actual U.S. Air Force photo with him in full dress uniform.
Wow.
It's amazing. When did you first start to have psychic experiences?
I've had them my whole life, but mainly after I had a health crisis when I was about 5 years old. And I had ate a whole bunch of aspirin, vomited blood, went into the emergency room, and had the experience of leaving my body. I left my body, and I was gone for about a half an hour. I actually saw a sunbeam coming through the ceiling while I had covers over my head. And I'm like, how does sunlight come through the ceiling? And I actually went up through that sunbeam and saw everybody in all the different floors. And I was above the hospital looking down, and I saw him heading towards a great light. I'm like, what is this great light? Am I heading towards the sun? What is it? And I looked towards the sun looked dim compared to the light I was headed towards. And then I merged with that light, and I felt such love and peace. And there was, this light is intelligent. And this light said, your body is made out of small structures called cells. I am repairing every single one of them, and I'm sending you right back. And so I actually did the reverse. I came out of the light, down through the sunbeam, down through the roof of the hospital, back, floating over my body in the emergency room. I looked down on my body, laying under the blanket in the emergency room. And I lined up with my body. And when I did that, I heard, get up, get up, get up. And on the third time, I actually leaped off the table. I didn't just sit up, I leaped off the table. And everybody looked shocked. I didn't understand why. And the doctor re-examined me, and he said not only was I fully recovered, but I was actually in better health than most children my age. And the thing is, my parents are the one who told me. My parents were the one that told me that I was passed away for 30 minutes. And then they recanted when people started to ask questions about this, when I started to make this public. So, because my parents just don't like the attention, I suppose. But it was my dad was very firm about that. It's like, yeah, you passed away. And in fact, when I was 18, I started going through my medical records, and there was actually a note from an ER physician. It said, recommended cause of death is bleeding through the stomach.
Wow.
I had no idea you'd been through that. I had no idea.
So after I came back, that was right when I started seeing spirits, because I felt like I was now on a different frequency. So I was able to see spirits. And it was hard for me to go through it because I got attacked immediately by these shadow entities and all sorts of dark entities that didn't want me to use my abilities, and they wanted to just make it horrible for me. I learned to stand up for myself at an early age because nobody believed me. So I stood up for myself against these things. And one night when I was probably about 6 years old, I was actually walking around the house, in the dark. I was telling them, because I had shadow people, would see them coming down the floors, the walls. They would growl at me, and I walked around the house and said, "Come out and fight me. I don't care who you are, what you are. Come out and fight me. I'm tired of not being able to get to sleep. I'm tired of things moving. I'm tired of the radio turning on full blast by itself, with the dial spinning and doors slamming and footsteps every night. And it's like I'm not getting any sleep." And when I did that, they quit appearing to me. They still had, I was still heavy paranormal activity, but they quit physically appearing to me. And then I also had angels coming to me, although at the time, angels were kind of like an abstract thing because I hadn't met an angel yet. Even though I had that experience, I never met an angel. And then I had an angel introduce himself to me by name. He said his name was Gabriel. He came to me as it was very little. And I kept getting messages from that. It's like the angels were teaching me and encouraging me, and I learned to pray, and I learned over time. They kept coming and teaching me things, and I learned how to set up boundaries so that certain spirits, if no matter how desperate they are, or they can't, they're only supposed to reach me at a certain time or a certain place, that where I can deal with them, because at some point I was so overwhelmed with spirit activity and paranormal and experiences. I would see, particularly people that had very difficult traumatic deaths, and they would look flesh and blood real, and they would be gory, and they would be just, have part of their faces missing or skinned, die these horrible deaths, and they would look real, and I would panic, and I would think, I have to call hospital, call 911 or something like that. And they would then start talking in my head, and then realize these were spirits, right? And then they would do something like appear in my back seat of my car and in the rear view mirror, and they're not there. Turn around, they're not there. They're only in my rear view mirror. And sometimes the opposite would happen. Or they suddenly appear and then suddenly disappear. And it would be so real. And I was like, and one of these spirits that came to me, I was 21, and it was in between semesters. So it's after leaving high school, and I'm waiting for college to start. And I decided one day I'm going to go ahead and take a walk. But before I go out for a walk, I'm going to go grab my jacket because it just might be cold. So as soon as I shut the door after getting my jacket out, this person appeared there, and he had been horribly mangled. All his skin was peeled off of him, where his bones were exposed. His skin was peeled down all the way down to his waist. And he had stone-washed jeans that were flared at the bottom, and he had bright, high-top tennis shoes, and they were glowing bright white, like they were lit, like they were emitting their own light. And he was leaning over me and talking in my head, and he said, "Man, I should have been like you. I smoked my weight in weed in high school, and I just took the first factory job I could, and they got killed on the job." And he's saying "man" at the end of every sentence. Just the way that he was talking, it sounded like it from maybe the 70s, the way that he was speaking. Plus, he had the flared bottom at the stonewashed jeans, is high top. It's like it screams 70s to me. And he was talking, but he was explaining to me that he would feel me, sense me, because I would drive by almost every day, because I attended both high school and college classes at the same time. Because of art, I got a small grant, and I was going back and forth between high school and college. And I would drive by the place of employment where he worked, where he was killed. And he told me about being sucked through machinery at the time. And he didn't know how to appear to me or how to reach out to me. All he would say is that he had to wait for the right conditions for him to appear to me. And I went into shock. I experienced so much shock because what I was seeing was so horrific. I mean, there was blood all over the floor of the carpet. And I could feel myself turn icy cold. And I could feel every hair on my head, on my arms, just standing up. And because I could feel myself going into shock, I said, "Hang on, I have to take a breath. I can't deal with this right now, but I'll be happy to help you when I can. Then just go take my walk, and I'll be back with you. You can come back." I went outside, and my dad says to me, "You look like you just seen a ghost," because I had no color in my face. I didn't tell him what I saw. He never came back. But I knew I was psychic then because when I looked up, I gave me enough information. He gave me the address, the time frame, his age. So I actually was able to find a public record of his death and validate every piece of information he was giving me. The address, I looked up the Department of Labor, Health, Safety, and Hygiene, and it said in 1979, an 18-year-old male was sucked through the machinery at the location I had been driving by. And that was the last recorded death at that location, but they had multiple fatalities. And that was actually considered safe at the time in the 70s to have one fatality every so many years.
I'm not sure what just happened.
Yes.
You disappeared for a second. It's like
you
were removed. It said it removed you from the stage and then put you back in, and I didn't touch anything.
I didn't either.
Somebody's validating that then.
That's never happened, and that's what's weird.
We're going to leave that in. We're not going to edit that out.
That's
it would have been one thing if I was around, but that was
the man who had passed on. He's now since crossed over, and he's validating what I'm saying is true.
Wow, that's honestly weird because that's never happened, and I didn't touch anything either. I didn't touch anything.
So so I feel like he's crossed because I kept praying for him, and I eventually learned how to help souls like him move over. You do have to help them get exposed more to that light. And I found that I was given the ability to actually open gateways to the other side so they could see that light. And then the closer they get to the light, the more healed they will feel, the better they will feel. And the more joy they experience. And they get to see their family. As the closer they get the light, they get to see their family. They get to see angels. They get to see the most beautiful place they've ever seen. And they could just walk into that beautiful scenery. And they've crossed over and it wasn't any big deal. And a lot of spirits have this terrible trepidation about crossing over because they're afraid of judgment, because judgment has been emphasized so much in their faith or Christianity and their afterlife, maybe from the pulpit. Maybe that's how the preacher or the reverend who would bring people back over and over again with threats of eternal judgment if you don't come. Well, that's for most spirits, that's not the case. They're not condemned. It's a matter of forgiving themselves and letting go of that and just letting them be just walking towards a light. And they're there.
Right.
The man who'd been ripped through the machine, I'm really interested in his statement. He was waiting for just the right conditions to appear to you. What does that mean? I'm really intrigued by that.
I don't know, but I don't know what the right conditions are. All I can tell you is kind of an impression because he never answered that question. And I think it has to do with there has to be something to do with vibration and dimensions intersecting. And I think dimensions kind of float around and kind of intersect. And maybe he's waiting for the right time for dimensions to overlap with certain conditions. I don't know what those conditions apply.
Right. Perfect sense. But now I'm wondering, how did he know that? Do they all know that? Do they all work with that? Do some of them ignore that? I have so many questions.
Imagine the physicist like Albert Einstein, who already has died and crossed over, if he would come over and tell us and do a lecture on this, right? And give us a lowdown on this.
And it's interesting too, because based off of the Estes method sessions that we've done together, where I get to talk to Travis, right? Some of the things that he has kind of said make sense to what she's saying because of at one point, I can't remember where this was or what the context was about, but I remember I was having a conversation with him and he started talking about the frequencies and how in the dimension that he was in, or I guess you could call it the afterlife, whatever, however he wants to word that, was that essentially where frequencies for us are they're not visible. We know they exist, but we can't see them. it's different for them. They can see them. They can see the different frequency particles and stuff like that. So you have to ask that question, is like, is that partially why they somewhat know about that? It's because they can see it. That's
Right.
interesting. Wow.
I'm going to be pulling his board out tonight. I've got questions.
You
We're,
gotta
wonder-
ask. You gotta have
I
a
wonder how
physicist
many
come.
times my spirit guides get so annoyed just from me with the phrase, I have questions.
Right.
I know. I feel like we need to coin that phrase just at
Yeah,
this point.
yeah. I have
Because-
questions.
Actually,
You're on the other side. I
Shelley
have
does that at the
questions for
jail
you.
too. Every
Um,
time Shelley does a session at the jail, she starts with, I have questions. And
Honestly,
I've actually heard them come through. We don't use necrometer there. Necrophonic is what we
Yeah.
use there. I've actually heard them respond directly to her saying, I have questions, and go, oh, I've actually heard it come through.
I've honestly just got so many questions just based off of the story you just told us.
Seriously.
Like it's so fascinating, and it's why I love talking to multiple different people with like different, I guess, outlooks or points of view on like what the afterlife is, because nobody is 100% sure exactly every aspect of what the afterlife is. So I think
Right.
that's what's interesting about talking to different people with different experiences and different outlooks on it. So I guess maybe if you're willing, would you mind kind of letting people know a little bit about what is your kind of outlook from your experiences that you have had with that?
But my outlook is that when people pass, it's just one stage of development. It's sort of like the caterpillar turning into the cocoon and then the butterfly later. It's just one stage in our evolution and many stages. And it's my belief is like from my experience from my past life, which I remember from
Right.
age 6 up to when I was killed at age 22, and I remember passing away and crossing over in that life, right? And it seems that we have some sort of agreement that we make with our souls before we get here of what kind of life path we're going to be taking and what we agreed to. Is like we have a contract. It's my experience that we have a contract, but that contract can be renegotiated if you ask. And it's how your life is supposed to go and what your mission is. It's sort of like, it's almost like being a military contractor in a sense. You're contracted to do a job, right, to help other souls. You're sent down here on a mission, right, to fulfill your contract. It's also helping you and also helping other souls, because when you are in alignment, that's when you feel most at peace, right, when you're aligned with your purpose, with your mission here. And you agreed that you're understanding that it's going to be hardship. You understand that there's going to be suffering, but you're agreeing to go through it. But you're going to be getting help from the other side. You listen to your guides, and as you follow through with that, and you get your reward, your recognition, you leave out of here. Then you're back, and you decide what's next. You can keep learning, right? You can keep learning and keep creating, but it's just my experience has been it's like what oneness or the source of everything wants everything to keep growing and keep learning and continue expanding awareness and just keep that creation or creativity going as much as we can and keep exploring.
Wow. I actually really love that explanation there. Because I feel like with the work that Christopher and I have done in the past year, especially with like past life stuff, that I don't know that I could have explained that better. I mean, that was awesome. And the thing about, there were some things that you said in there that I hadn't even thought of before, like the contract idea. That makes a lot of sense as to why, like, as you start getting into different research of like past lives and like start diving into that whole thing about like what did you do in a past life, how sometimes they're similar and sometimes they're different, and then
Right.
it's kind of like, so then everybody has the question of like, well, do you just keep on reincarnating forever, or is there eventually a point at which you just pass over? And so wow, I think that's interesting. I like that explanation.
Right, and then Christopher, I think when I read you and did that drawing for you, that tied into your past life.
Yes, it certainly did.
We did. We have something in common, right? We were both soldiers. I was a soldier of World War II. You were a Civil War soldier. So
technically, all three of us have something in common.
Yes.
Civil War for sure. We've done a lot of work in that. We were not only both a part of the Civil War lifetime, but actually we found out that we were friends in that lifetime as well, and we're soldiers together.
Yeah, I knew exactly who I was. I found my military record, my date of birth matching what I remembered, and even I found the camp where I was killed. So I remember my mission. You know, I was 19 when I was in World War II. So, and I was killed when I was 22. And I remember every step of the way, and I had this sudden recall. And I was like 20, 22 or so, or 21, almost going 22. And I had incredible visions at night, and they would come through in the form of dreams, and they were memories, and they were in chronological order, and I knew these were memories. Wow. And I told, and they went on and on and on, and then at the last few nights in a row, I just relived my death. And then the next day was the anniversary of the end of the Second World War, and I talked to a World War II veteran, and he quizzed me up and down, and he said, I don't know how you were in World War II, but you were a soldier there, and I just can't explain it. I can't explain how you got all of these memories from being there because they're accurate. There's no way you could have answered all those questions correctly unless you were there.
Wow.
I'd wake up speaking German and had no idea. I would figure out what I would say because I knew somebody who would speak German and translate it, and it would be grammatically correct and it was translatable. And I sung the entire Raise High the Flag song in German, which if you translate right from German into English, that's what it would say. It's Raise High the Flag, but it was a propaganda song at the time because I was in the OSS, and so I had infiltrated the Wehrmacht. And I grew up where my grandfather only spoke German. He raised me. My grandma, my Oma died, which is German, Oma. And my mother, who was probably maybe 14, 15, and she walked out on me. And it was just me and my grandpa who spoke mostly German, only a handful of English words. So I was fluent in German, and Pearl Harbor happened, and looked at me and like, we got an office for you. We know exactly where. And they didn't test me to see how I could speak German. They just threw me into the OSS. I did have a lot of training though, and I remember my training. And I was a tall dude. I was like 6'7". So, and I went to this short version. So, it's like, what happened, man? Come on. I was tall once. At least I got memories of being tall. But
yeah, I was taller than this too, actually.
Right, and so she's like, "Oh, what's the deal with that?" I said, "That's one of my questions." Like, okay, I was tall. What's the deal with being born shorter? Next up, so
wow,
yeah, I had pain everywhere I was shot. But I was shot by the SS, and I had pain everywhere where I was shot. Everywhere I had an entry wound. I had chronic pain, and nobody could explain it.
Wow.
And then I started to follow the same path that Frank did, and got into self-defense. Of course, I feel like I'm Frank because that's his personality and mine are basically the same. Right? So, right. I love those things anyway. So I got into self-defense, got into martial arts, and always been a fan of guns and history, and started to learn the German language again, like relearning it. And then my spirit family from that past life would come and talk to me and through the spirit box, and I had amazing conversations with them. I spoke with my grandfather who did not reincarnate, my grandfather who raised me, and we had like through a spirit box from somebody operating a spirit box in another state, we had about a 5-minute conversation in German, entirely in German.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I'm not often left speechless, and Christopher knows this. But wow, I don't even really
Well,
know how to respond to that. That's just
I
amazing.
kind of think this is probably be my lost incarnation because I had a lot of spirits that coming through that have known me in past lives. It's like they're trying to wrap everything up or finalize things between us, or I get acknowledgement. I know it was in World War One. I have memories from that, from being prisoner of World War One, and then I had a German officer that took me prisoner come through and speak through the spirit box. Again, on another state and on a live show, his voice came through and he was answering questions both in English and in German. And he also talked disembodied. The disembodied voice in a painting was working for him. And he had a great sense of humor, this officer that had taken me prisoner. And his name was, his last name was Gruber. So Officer Gruber, he retired after World War One, and then I see him without his uniform, and then see him in like his old man clothes from like the late 1940s, and he was showing me his great granddaughter at the time, or his granddaughter at the time, that had been born in around the Second World War, and I could see her little eyes, her little blonde hair. You know, she was just like wee little. She was sneaking over the table like this because every time she come over, they'd make cookies, and he was showing me this, and
Okay.
we got to be friends, and I really appreciated him doing that. It was a terrible time, and I remember I didn't even get the fire shot in the First World War. I just I was in the British Army, and I was just maybe 18. I remember I was 18, and we went to the trenches in 2 rows. We had 2 rows of guys. We walked out. We got to our trenches, and I put my rifle down to set it on, sit on the top of the trench. And then I heard, "Lay down your weapons." And it was a German with the Pickelhaube on, right, the pointed helmet, telling us in English to lay down our weapons. And he took us all prisoner. And then when he had us prisoner, remember we were given food rations. We were given a little bit of meat, and we were given water to drink. And he would make everybody dig their own grave, and he would walk up behind them and shoot them in the head with a pistol. And I was the last person. So when he came to me and he put the pistol in the back of my head and he said, "Auf Wiedersehen," a soldat, right, a German soldier, came up to him, put both arms on his arm and said, "Stop, an armistice has been reached. It's illegal for you to shoot." So right then, he had the gun back ready to shoot, and he could not shoot because right then they got word that the armistice had been reached. And I was sent back, but I could not function when I got back. I just could not function because the reality of being out there in that condition in war, where I was so afraid, and there were dead bodies all around me, and I was so scared, and I didn't know how. I don't remember how I got back to England. I don't remember. I just know, how am I going to get back? I can't walk back from France. How am I going to get there? And it was so terrifying. I remember hiding in buildings and everything, and I would get back, and it just seemed like everything was like a dream world. It wasn't real to me when I got back. It just wasn't real. What was real was out there in the mud, in the trenches. That was real. Back home, where there was people and things where life would continue, it wasn't real. It was just like an illusion. It was like a projection out of a movie projector. It wasn't real to me. And I just couldn't function. And I just kind of went into a comatose state. And I don't remember how I died, but Gruber, when he came through, he said to me that I died from pneumonia. Probably was brought on. We had the 1918 flu. It was probably brought on by that, but I had died in my 20s from it. So I know I went into a kind of a comatose because I couldn't put those two realities together. I couldn't rectify that.
Wow.
I couldn't make it one reality.
Wow. And so whenever you have these memories of these past lives, how does that typically like come to your knowledge? Like, do you just remember it, or is it like
There's for the World War One.
Mhm.
When I was little, I was kidnapped, and I had a gun pointed at the back of my head, and suddenly, for some reason, I at that moment I realized I'm 18 and I'm an 18-year-old man, and I'm World War One. I'm not 5 years old at that moment. And then something about that experience said, "Do not look him in the eyes. he can't shoot you if you look him in the eyes. Which I knew that Gruber, if somebody turned around and looked him in the eyes, I don't think he could have shot, he couldn't have executed us. So I looked at the person in the eyes and I said, if you're going to shoot me, I want to see you do it. So I faced him and I looked him in the eyes and he couldn't do it.
Wow.
That's the first time. And then it started coming through in dreams, and I would have these dreams. And first, the dreams would be normal as dreams could be. And then all of a sudden, I see repeated imagery over and over again. I would see mud. I'd see pipes sticking out of the ground, which, of course, would have been the air vents for those underground bunkers. And I would see all this mud, and then I would feel so much fear. And I would just be overwhelmed, and I'm like, you know what, I got to see what this is about. And then all of a sudden the dream would change, and then the whole memory just came back, and it just took over the entire dream. And it's just like it came to be.
Right.
And that, you know, I don't remember my name from World War I. I just remembered that was kind of in the upper class. And they kept telling me that I had a duty. 17 or 18, I remember talking to my mom before I left. And when I came back, I took out my uniform. I kept my uniform and I laid it out really carefully. And it was around Christmas time. And I laid out my uniform and I just stared at it all night.
Wow.
It was just really hard on me for World War I. And I just couldn't get past it. And then I got born again in April 24th, 1922. And then went back to war again. And I turned 19.
Wow.
I was married, and I remember my wife. I remember as Frank Hoff. I remember the officers. I had my commander in my barracks was Capitaine Edouard Zasson. He was French. He was a French Jewish man, and he was in World War I and World War II. And he was the captain of my barracks. He would speak English, French, and German fluently, without a discernible accent between any of those languages. And he befriended me, and he became like a second dad for me. And he also told me he had a 30-year-old son named Pierre, who was also in the OSS. And I worked with Klaus Wilhelm von Brunner, who was a SS member because he was upper class, but he was also Jewish. And we worked together to help liberate camps. And the camp that I was killed, and it took me years to find it because it was a small camp. And it's the only camp that was liberated on the date that I remember I was killed, which is November 9th, 1944. And that was the Nelsona Stadthof camp. And it was a labor camp, and it was they were mining granite at that camp.
Wow.
I remember I was stationed. And it's just, it would be hours to go over everything I remember. But yes.
This is just blowing my mind right now.
Yeah. Right, and I'm and when spirits come through, they will call me Frank. If they're American and they were contemporary to World War II, they will often call me Frank. And if they're German or French, they would always come through saying Hoff, because back then they would use your surname.
Right.
For if you're French or German, and a lot of them that would come through, and even soldiers today, even the soldier I told you about, right, who was a recent death, who passed away very recently, and about 2000, I think it was about 2006 when he passed. He started calling me Frank, and he came through.
Have you met anybody in this lifetime that you realize was connected to you in any of these past lifetimes?
Yes, I met my wife. It was my wife then, who was Frank Hoff's wife. He came back, and my wife Mary came back as a man, Jeff. And Jeff became a Satanist in his life, but he didn't know why he had so much hatred towards God. But when we met each other, we recognized each other from that life. And he started calling me Frank, and I started calling him Mary. And we knew who each other were. But the reason why he had so much animosity towards God is because I was killed. Right? I was 22 when I was killed. Right? She was alone from when she, we were both about the same age when we were married, about 19. And we were only married 6 months before I was off in war and then was killed, a few years later. And that made her angry towards God. That's why she became a Satanist when she was reborn again. It was like, I'm going to get revenge this time around. And then he passed away at 25. unexpectedly, and we had this deep connection that I knew I felt when he passed away. And then he started coming to me in spirit, and then I helped cross him over, and then we started to talk a little bit more about um, that lifetime, and that there were other lifetimes that we were together in. But he is now working. He is angelic, and he is now a spirit guide for other people. A former Satanist, he renounced that, and he became an angel, and is utterly, forgiven, because I mean, between our relationship, and not only in that life, but in his afterlife, meeting again. And I mean, when he showed up in his afterlife to me in spirit, not only he would talk audibly, but he actually touched my face. I felt him kiss me on the forehead, and he touched my face like this.
Wow.
Yeah. So
The thing that's really standing out to me that I mean, all of this is just completely blowing my mind, and I'm literally enjoying every second of listening to you talk right now, because like the work that Christopher and I have done in our past life, like I feel like we've done a lot, and then you start talking, I'm like, wow, no, we haven't. We're not even close to like.
Yeah, Chris is going to tell you about him, because when we met and I did his drawing, he's going to tell you about that, because that was crazy for you with the Civil War thing.
Well, because the things that we've done together on that, because like, so what we've been told based off of his spirit guide is that Christopher and I have been connected in like 9 different lifetimes, and and it's interesting to hear about this. I definitely do want to get into looking up Zeke and Eric's actual, like, if we can find any of their records, that would be cool if we could do that. But the thing that's really standing out to me, because I think it's interesting and what a lot of people watching might be curious about, is the fact that we've talked a lot about, reincarnation and the afterlife and stuff like that. But then there's little mentions of like angels and stuff like that, which typically in normal society, as we'll sort of say that, because what is normal, in normal society they typically put angels with like the Christian faith and stuff like that. And I know from the work that Christopher and I have done, we found more that the case is not necessarily like, it's not like one religion type of thing. It's kind of like more of, none of them are 100% correct. It's more of little sprinkles from each one has a piece of the puzzle that's correct. But that's where I kind of want to hear from your point of view. Whenever you talk about the angels, what does that mean for people that are listening? What does that mean?
An angel is someone who is a soul created by God and or by source, and they are servants. So they have a contract to serve, but they can also be in body, so they can learn to be better angels, right? They can have missions on earth and be born here. And the same way with the fallen angels, with the demonic. I've run into those. They also have missions. They have their independent message from their pastor, and they can be in body too. And I've been told in spirit that I am one of these angels. And that's why I have some of the abilities that I have, because I was given a mission through multiple lifetimes to learn to keep in bond with the goal of getting humanity to evolve to a higher level of consciousness, so that they can continue creating, right, and become part of that creation. But that suffering was introduced because we were not progressing as a species without it. Unless we had suffering, we would not progress, we would not evolve. So we had to introduce suffering, but and learn, teach people to move away from it, right? To do what is necessary to build faith, to learn trust, to learn forgiveness, to learn about mindfulness and the greater consciousness and the spirituality that the beings that they truly are, and move them forward. And we, as in the angelic realm, right, we are also in body doing this work too, not just in spirit. And there are many angels that are in spirit that are doing this work. They just are not connecting to the physical body, but they'll talk to us, they'll interact, and they can intervene on our behalf and help guide us and teach us. And the angels can take many different forms. They can be animals. They can be a mix of human and animal. They can be just lights. They can take all sorts of form. There are all sorts of crazy, wacky designs I have seen of the angelic form, right? And you think, just looking at myself, as I've been shown kind of what myself has looked like. I've been shown with I have eyes. People, when other people see me, they say I have eyes all the way around. That I have some wings. I have armor. I have chains. I have the ability to excel fire towards the enemies. I have abilities to manipulate the frequencies of light. And
Have you ever been able to see? Because it sounds like what you're describing is basically what your supposed angelic form is.
right.
Have you been ever able to see somebody else's angelic form?
Yes, I have. I have a couple of friends that they're like human angel mix. They're the human angel hybrids, right? But they're created in spirit, right? They're not like Nephilim, right? That's an angel, like the fallen angel hybrid. This is something that God does. And the way God does with hybrids, because there are certain entities they cannot detect that mix of frequencies. So it's like they're going in ninja style on their mentions because they're undetectable. They're kind of like under the radar. But yes, there are a couple of friends of mine that are these human angel hybrids. And so they go on missions that angels can't go on because the dark entities cannot detect a human angel hybrid because the frequency is so weird to them to pick up.
And I feel like that right there, it kind of opens up a can of worms into something that I can't say I've theorized about, but it has been on my mind for a while. Because so Christopher and I have had a lot of talks about this idea, because one of the things that we've been told a lot by his spirit guide, who according to his spirit guide is one of these angelic beings,
Right.
is to essentially, I guess, summarize what we've been told from him. And the things that he's told us about, like how we have a whole mission and stuff like that, it kind of dives into what I think you're talking about. And it's interesting because one of the things that we've been told, or I guess have been kind of shown in a way, is like, so obviously, because Christopher has the ability to channel spirits,
Right.
it's really easy for, say, an entity that's, wanting to sort of, I don't want to use the word possess because obviously that's a completely different thing, but they're able to kind of step into his body and channel through him.
Mm-hmm.
And because they have that access, it's easy. But for some unknown reason, at least unknown reason at this point in time, other than his spirit guide Travis just telling me that my spiritual energy is very strong like Christopher's, they don't really seem to be able to influence me at all. And so whenever you start talking about that, it just sort of it makes me curious about that. Like, because both Christopher and I have been told how we have missions and stuff like that we're sent
Right.
on. And I think anybody that's familiar with our work, we're sent on missions all the time. So
Right.
like, it sounds so similar to what you're talking about. That's why I think I'm
Right.
latching on to it as much as I am, because, and it's interesting because as many people as I've talked to at this point in time, I can easily say I've never heard anybody with your story. And it just fascinates me so much. And I think there's a lot of similarities in what you're talking about that I've experienced in the last year. And I've never actually personally met you yet. And I think that's what's interesting. There's a lot of similarities there.
I can leave my body and I will go to a location like they're having issues with spirits, and I can deal with those spirits and remove them from the property and have other spirits come in and protect it as well. Like there's one property nearby where the person that's this group of people down the street are kind of into criminal activity, and they kind of use dark magic, and sometimes they bring in bad spirits, and then these other people that are involved end up getting harassed. But there are Civil War soldiers on that property who are asked to report to me. And so when I go over there and I see, and I'm dealing with the spirits, and I recorded the whole session. In fact, I think I put it on Facebook, where you could actually hear the Civil War soldier say, "Yeah, I got her." And he started making comments to this dark entity that was sent to harass, and he started calling her names, like, she's not a good person. He's holding her for me. So I was able to talk to her and ask her if she was going to let go of her bitterness, and she said, "Well, maybe." And then I took her up. So we all took her up to heaven. We put her in this tub of holy water. Essentially, it kind of glows with light. It's supposed to purify your soul of your bitterness and your darkness. And we would put her in there, and the water would darken, and then she was just gone. But you could hear the whole process. The Civil War soldier, and then when I got her up there, she talked about seeing angels. This woman that was taken up there, and another one of my guys, I hear him say, "Yeah, she has a lot of bitterness. Look how dark the water is." So I started seeing the water turn dark. And then she was just gone, because that was all that was left, was bitterness.
Wow.
She was just gone. So yes, we are sent on missions. And when I feel like if I'm doing a portrait for somebody, and I think I sent you an image of one of my paintings that I did, it's not only am I painting that spirit, but I can paint what they are showing me. So sometimes spirits will show you images in your head, or show you images maybe in dreams or something like that, and I paint it out. This is printed out, and sometimes I have conversations with spirits and say, "Well, are you changing your mind? How do you want to do this?" Right? Or I'll approach the cave. Well, if we're going to put all of this information together and all these images together, you realize it's going to be crowded. We're going to have to work this out some way. So, sometimes we'll have a little back and forth, but I will go ahead and paint with the show me, or paint the spirit, or both, and incorporate it into a painting for somebody. And then they can use that painting as the connection to their spirit guide and keep that, right? So they're keeping that painting. I ship it to them. They can hang it on their wall. And then when they're in meditation, they can start talking to that spirit, and they have that painting for reference. They can keep looking back to it, and they can look at it over and over again for the messages from the spirit, because there's so many messages and symbols they'll come through with also.
Right.
Well, I've got mine from you right here in front of me. So I want to show everybody, and I want to tell the story of how that happened too.
Yeah.
So this was at the Old Paulding Jail Psychic Fair 2 Octobers ago. When I walked in for that event, I was an absolute mess. I just spent 5 nights at the Billy Creek Civil War House learning all about Zeke and his wife and his children and so much more. And in leaving ISS to go to Paulding, they'd been saying to me for days, "They're not going to let you leave here. They're going to make you stay." And sure as shit, my fucking car wouldn't start in the morning. So I had to have my car jumped. And then one of the last things I did before arriving at the jail was stop to buy a new battery. So I'm a mess, because I've just had this 5-day long deep dive into my Civil War past life. And now I'm dealing with this new car battery. I walked into the jail with my arms loaded with all of my things, and I walked past everybody, and I didn't even say hello. I wasn't being rude. I just had my arms loaded and wanted to put the shit down. Right. So I came back downstairs, and 2 people looked at me and said, "Oh, it's you. You walked in. We didn't realize it was you. You didn't look like yourself." I thought, yeah, that tracks right now. I didn't really have time to talk about this. We just dove into the psychic fair. Maybe that night we did a little investigating, but I still didn't have much time to talk about what I was going through. And I really didn't get to talk to you about it much. I didn't know you that well at all. But the next morning you came to me and told me that Spirit told you you had to have a reading from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, let's just do a trade, and I'll take a portrait, and you got your reading first. I felt that was important because Spirit told you had to have the reading from me. So then I sat down in front of you to do my drawing, and you drew Zeke.
Yes.
And his injuries from the war.
Yes.
Wow.
And you knew nothing about what the last 5 days of my life had been. What you might not even know since the injury to his left eye.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that's come up over and over again. We've gotten reference to left eye on different investigations. The first time it came through in an app, and I'm like, Left Eye from TLC? That's what I'm thinking, because I believe she's the one who passed away. I'm like, are we about to speak to Left Eye from
Right.
And just this past October, going back to ISS for Covered Bridge, I walked into what used to be the chapel, and there was this stuffed animal sitting on a bench, and I looked at it and I'm like, it's missing its left eye. And I'm like, wait a minute. That thing that's sitting there on the bench, missing its left eye, I have that tattooed on my left leg. That animal missing its left eye, I've had it tattooed on me for years. And then it was just after that, I took a picture of myself at FCI, and the shadowing looked just like this.
Wow.
Just like this. I posted a side-by-side of this picture and the selfie I took that night. It was identical with the shadowing.
The amount of left eye like references has been strange.
And have you tried doing a spirit box session with yourself, your past life self?
We don't have to use the box.
No,
he just
actually
comes and goes as he pleases.
Actually, I mean, like at this point, not in the series that's coming out here, but there will be series after that where I've had one-on-one conversations with Zeke. So it's interesting to say the least, I think, whenever he channels Zeke. And then again, because of the past life stuff that we've done together, and actually realizing that who I was, my name was Eric at that point in time. Eric was his best friend, and so when Zeke comes through, he only refers to me as Eric, and we have a back and forth conversation like it was back in those days. It's like, even though I don't channel, I guess my abilities are different, and I'm not at a point in time to really even explain or have a name for all that I do, I guess. Christopher being more experienced, he could probably summarize it a little bit better than I could. I just kind of go with the flow with what I do. But even though I don't channel, it's like whenever Zeke comes through and he starts talking, I even talk a little bit differently based off of how I normally talk, and it's just what I feel in the moment, I think.
Yeah, because how you were acting at Old Paulding Jail, like, remember we were talking about the Winchester rifle and how you reacted. Because I'm like, the Winchester rifle was just a varmint gun, and you're like, yeah, and you probably aren't very familiar in this life with that gun, but the way that you reacted was exactly how I would expect a Civil War veteran to act. Like, yeah, that's just a varmint gun. And the way that your hat is still off to the side,
it has been since. I have no ability to wear my hat straight. None. It's gone. I can't wear it straight. Like the action of me putting it on, it goes on and it tilts. Just instantly. No, actually, Zeke has had missions on our investigations as well. We went to a location, and I'm not even going to say what location it was because there'll be a video out there eventually. A spirit connected with that location wasn't speaking to me. He was speaking to Zeke. He was recognizing Zeke. And Zeke had to do something to make something right there. So he still has missions himself.
Yeah, I've had people that I read for, and I had Officer Gruber come in with somebody I was reading for, and he looked different than I see with other spirits. Because typically, when I see spirits with people, I see them standing behind them, or I see them in their aura. This time, I was seeing the officer. I was seeing him in his full dress uniform, but I was seeing a completely different room. It was like he was standing in an officer's quarters in World War I, and with everything from that time frame in that room. Wow. He also introduced me to Friedrich. So Friedrich is a friend of mine that I helped crossed over because what Gruber was telling me to do, that he needed my help to cross over all these soldiers, German soldiers that were kind of stuck in what's like a consensus reality. In other words, they're so into war, they're in fighting the war, all the time, right? And their souls are deteriorating, right? Because they're in this war state constantly and they needed rescue. And he came to me for that. And so I went to this place called Purgatory, and I could just go there. And I was doing this flyover, seeing this massive scene, to see all these trenches, right? See all these trenches, there's all these skeletons and these ragged clothes, and they're all fighting. Everything is just red. There's a red light. There's this, you could hear munitions going off. And I see this really tall skeleton sticking out of the trench, and he looked right up at me. And I've seen a lot of creepy things, but there's nothing creepier than seeing a skeleton look up at you in the skull. Somebody's behind those eye sockets looking right at you. And then I kind of jolt out of that. And I'm like, I wonder if I really was at that place visiting these people and just kind of getting a lay of the land of how I'm going to help these souls. And then Friedrich, this one that looked up at me, he came back with me. So I'm wide awake. And he appears over me, floating, and he was face to face with me. First, his face looked normal, like any normal person, nice looking guy, and then it just went to skull. And then he said, "Save us," and he said it in a growling voice. I said, "Okay," and I was like shaking because it's been a long time since I had an apparition appear like that, and bodily form and floating over me. So, I actually went back and said, "Okay, we'll do this." So I asked Gruber, like, how are we going to do this? And he had one word, Liebe. So Liebe in German is love. So I go over, and knowing that I was a soldier in World War II, so I asked all the Germans who had already crossed over, who were friends and who knew me, to kind of stand at the gate. So basically, I opened a doorway to heaven. I asked them to stand there. And then I saw all these soldiers around. And I said, okay, I'm going to call in munitions, but I'm going to call in munitions of love. And it's going to be blasts of love just all over this battlefield. And so all these lights came in and got blasting. And then every time a munition would hit, the soldier would look down his hands, and he had skin back on his hands. And he's looking at himself like, how am I getting myself back? So, and then I said, I just yelled Marsch, right? German for march, just forward. And it pointed the direction everybody needs to go. So everybody went that way. Crossed all these people over, and then that's Friedrich, who was the tall skeleton, was the only one that's still standing. So I went to grab him, to drag him over, and he was resisting and he was struggling. It's like, this burns. And I said, we as angels, and I've been told this before, if you resist, that we're supposed to just throw you into eternal damnation and you're never going to get to heaven. Quit moving so I can get you over there. Quit resisting. And he quit moving. He quit moving like that. Okay. So I grab him and I actually carry him over, and he crosses over. He runs off. All the Germans are celebrating. Like, I wonder if I'll see him again, but I hope he's happy. I hope he's reunited with his family. And then a few days later, he starts talking through the spirit box, and he introduced himself by name. He spoke in English and German. And we have such a great friendship, and we went on missions, because even before I knew I had abilities, back then when I first started realizing I was framed, I was being sent on missions as an angelic missions to protect the city of Cologne, which in English we call it Cologne, Germany, but Cologne, Germany. That's where I was stationed in the Second World War. That's where my main barracks were, and I would watch over that city. And this time he started coming with me. And it was really cool, because every time I've been over there, it's my job. It was to gather all these Germans would come to me and say, can you help us find our families? That, because Cologne was bombed. It was completely destroyed except for the Church of St. Peter. And I would hang out on top of Church of St. Peter. There's a couple of other places I'd hang out. And I was like, oh my gosh, this town has a party feel and I want to enjoy it. But all these people keep coming to me asking to look for their families. So I would go to the train station, and they have the actual train station. And then I would ask for a train from heaven. So I set up a heavenly train for all of these Germans to go board the train, so they go get a train ride to see their loved ones on the other side. So I've been doing that for years. And then this time, Friedrich's with me, and Friedrich sat behind me on one of the trains. but he's 2 seats back, and we're like, it's like 1 or 2 in the morning German time, right? So a lot of trains are empty at this point, right? There's not a lot of trains running at that time of day. And there was a demon there, and he could show himself in physical form. He would ride the trains in physical form, and he was really fashionable. He had like a high collar, and he also had like this little helper entity that looked like a cat, but it wasn't really a cat. It was like a weird twisted version of a cat. It was creepy looking. And this demon started harassing, started going over the seat and talking to me. And then Friedrich taps him on the shoulder, said, "You better stop." Because guess what? I'm coming for you. You better be nice. You better not say anything. And so Friedrich had my back. So we go along the train. I decided that I wanted to leave the train and go on top. They have this one building in Cologne that's this one glass building. It's a giant glass building, tall building. So I go and stand on top of that because that's a high vantage point and I can kind of watch the city. I was doing that, and this demon came up. He was hand over hand. He had all these teeth, try to get in my face. And Friedrich was right there, and it's like, let me just incinerate him, because on the other side, he's been handing a flamethrower that, instead of missing flame, like we understand flame, it's more like a frequency of love and obliterates the darkness. And this entity came up to me, and I put it over his entire face, and I just kind of squished him like, you don't have any power here anymore. Not in Cologne, you don't. And Friedrich went back and just used a flamethrower. So he would tail behind me with a flamethrower. And if we were running to an entity or dark entity, he would come out and roast them. And he even came through in the spirit box saying, "Yeah, we ran into a few demons, didn't we?" And he says, "Yeah, I roast them." So it's really cool because he died the same year I did, in 1944. He was actually in his 40s. He was with the Panzer Division. Friedrich Katz, he was with the 7th Panzer Division, was shot in the back when he was exiting a tank that was bogged down in mud. I think it was shot by the Russians. He had a little boy that died when about 3. His name was Siegfried, and Siegfried came through because when I was starting to relearn German, and I said, "Wie geht es dir?" And his little voice would come through and say, "Mir geht es gut." You know, little 3-year-old little voice come through, and then his other son came through. Now he mentioned him briefly. He said, "Fritz is sick." And I said, "Who's Fritz?" And he didn't say anything. And then a few months later, he comes back and he says, "Fritz passed away last night." And this is through the spirit box. And I said, "Who's Fritz?" He says, "Fritz is my son." And I said, "So he was born in 1944, so he was 80, right, when he passed away." And he says, "Yes, it was a tough night last night." Then all my other spirits were around me, were freaking out because Fritz was a Satanist, because he had lost his dad, right? It created issues for him. But we talked to Fritz, and Fritz comes through with a gravelly voice, but it's father and son. So imagine his son is 80 years old. Father is still 40. Right? And they're reuniting in the afterlife, and father is still trying to take care of his son. And he asked me to take his son to heaven to get purified so he can be healed. And I did that for him. He asked me to do that, and I did that. And Fritz comes back. He's like, "You took me up there with the angels." I said, "Yes, we did." And he was very helpful. He kind of got the inside scoop because he had that years as a Satanist, right? But he had died of liver cancer. And then I looked at when somebody's diagnosed of liver cancer up to when they died, that time frame, it was the same time frame when Fritz said, when Friedrich said Fritz was sick. When he died is the typical average length of time for the lifespan of that, for the illness to end, from the start of the illness to death, right? From diagnosis to death for liver cancer. But it's father and son is just, they are now very, very happy together. And now he has both his sons with him. He's got his young son who chose not to grow up. He could have grown up in heaven, but chose not to. And I also talked to his wife. So the family is all together, and Friedrich is extremely happy whenever he comes through. He's very, very grateful. He always says we're best friends. And his favorite word to say when that's when we're together is Los Gates, which is German for let's go. Like he's the guy like, let's go on the mission, let's go. Like go. He's that type of guy. So I found out he would have been with the ironically, they would have called the 7th Panzer Division was called the Ghost Division. They are legendary in the Wehrmacht. So if you look at World War II, look at history, you talk about the Ghost Division, they were like the most best of the best when it comes to Panzer divisions.
Wow.
Isn't that something? And I've had, and interesting, I find that the German connection is very useful because we're doing spirit box sessions. The overwhelming majority of immigrants that were in both sides of the Civil War, they were German. So, like, there's a cemetery near me, and I would get German coming through, and I found with Civil War soldiers, they would just give numbers at first because they were giving the regiment numbers, right? They were in, and then you can look up the regiment they were in. It helps you figure out the history, then you can go back and ask for, follow-up questions. And I had a German come through, and he kept saying, first he kept saying his regiment number, and we have this German community here, right? There was a German-speaking community here. And then he was so thrilled to hear German, first of all, somebody got to speak German. And he said, why me? He would just say very few words. He said his regiment number, and then he would just keep saying, why me over and over. So I still want to keep talking to him, introduce him to other Germans and help him. But I find that it is useful. And I've also had French come through my spirit box also. And I speak some French. It's been helpful. I'm not fluent in French by any means, but it's helpful. And
I'm actually pretty fluent in French. Not that long ago had an opportunity to connect to someone who only wrote French using a Ouija board. That's all she wrote was in French. And I was having a great time, but the person whose house it was, who wanted to know more about the spirits there, was getting really irritated because she wasn't understanding what was coming through the board, and she wasn't understanding what I was saying when I was asking questions. I was having fun.
Wow. That's another part of the paranormal investigation. I think the more languages you have represented there, it's better the communication's going to be. I even had Russian come through locally, and I was shocked. Like, this local name, Russian, and then it turned out there was a Russian family, group of Russians that immigrated around the time of the Civil War. So there's this Russian family's present, and some of the people that I talked to and actually go to the cemetery and see their surnames on the graves. Like, wow, I actually talked to this person, and they're here. Here's a record of them, right? One of them was a McDonald, I think his name was was it McDonald? Was a Scottish man, but his Scottish accent was so thick it was hard to listen through. Mm-hmm. I kept asking to repeat everything because the Scottish accent was so thick. I found his stone and his wife's information also. He came in through with his wife. His wife was pregnant when she passed. And she kept asking me, am I going to see my baby when you cross over? I said, yes, you'll see your baby. And he said, I'm not crossing over without my wife. So they both crossed over, and I have a app called GhostTube, right? It's supposed to allow spirits to generate images. Mm-hmm. And shortly after that, there was an image of this woman, probably from the 1800s, and she was holding a baby. And I knew that was her. That's like who I saw, right? That was his wife. And she got to be reunited with her baby. And we wonder what happens when, if you're pregnant or you lose the baby, or what happens to the baby in the afterlife. Well, the baby has an afterlife. Sometimes that baby comes back and gets born again. Other times that, you get reunited with the baby when you cross over. The baby's there waiting for you.
Wow.
It's definitely something to be able to use what we have to help these spirits, isn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I love it. I love to help the spirits. And At first, it was terrifying because there's people that's gone through so much suffering, right? And you see that, and it's just overwhelming sometimes. And you see what they've gone through, and then the paranormal experiences on top of that, and then they manifest themselves. Like I had a lady that was from Poland that she came through the spirit box very clearly. I had to put that session on Facebook. But I was down in Cincinnati. She'd followed me from Cincinnati, and she showed me her immigration papers in a dream, and she came here right in 1900 in Cincinnati, where she immigrated to. I found the church where she went to. A friend of mine was able to find an obituary with the same name. And she had a German last name. And I thought, well, if you're from Poland, why do you have a German last name? It's because many of the Polish people, when Germany had actually conquered part of Poland, long before the Second World War, a lot of Polish people took German surnames. So she had a German surname, but she got necrotizing fasciitis while she was here. She was a dressmaker. She was considered herself a fashion designer. She had 2 kids. And when you have any type of skin disease, they would have just classified it as leprosy at the time. You get everything taken away from you and you get sent away. And she's like, this is not my fault. I did a portrait of her and how she also manifested herself. She grabbed me like this in bed and was pulling me down into the bed, like for attention. She pulled me down. I'm like, I can't do this right now. I have a job to get to in the morning, please.
Okay.
And please. And she says, okay, she says, go ahead, sleep beautiful. And then she let go. Then she also appeared in broad daylight as the tallest, blackest shadow person I've ever seen under my carport. I was just doing yard work, and I saw this shadow person. And then I was sitting in a room, and her head popped out from behind the door, but her head was like 2 or 3 inches off the floor. Right? It was just, if you're going to peek around the door, most people don't peek around the bottom of the door. They peek around their height. You don't peek around like this much off the floor, right? But it was the exact face I've been seeing in my dreams when she's been coming through. And I helped cross her over. She was, fully healed, and she showed gratitude, and she came back, and she was so happy. She was just crying with tears of joy, right? She gets to be reunited with her husband and her kids, her 2 boys on the other side. So it's great healing. It's a great gratitude to get from these spirits, because like the spirits are, a lot of times they're just misunderstood. Sometimes they've already crossed over and they just want to reaffirm that connection. I've had a man that was called, he would come through, who said he was my husband from, and I actually had to look this up, from the 1600s, and his name was Sedgwick. And I said, are you sure it's not like Sedgwick? No. And he said, no, Sedgwick. That was his proper name. And that we had lived in Brannon Woods. The place is still there, so it is an historical record. It was a market at the time. And I remember we met at the market, and he rushed me off to Scotland. And I kept having miscarriages, and that was crushing him. He wanted kids so much. And then back then, they thought women needed to be shut up out of the daylight while they were pregnant. But it actually has to be the opposite. Women need vitamin D, when they're pregnant. And he was my husband at the time. So, and I had to learn Old English to understand what he was saying. And I could understand, I got really good at Old English. I kind of forget a lot of it now, but I got good enough at Old English where I could understand what he was saying, and we could have a conversation back and forth. And he was, was saying, I still love you. I also had a man come through that he just kept showing me a crown, and he kept saying, I love you. He said, priest. And I was like, I kept getting impression king. And I said, wait a minute, were you my son? He said, yes, King Henry I. I was the mother of King Henry I in a prior life. I was also known as I was also the second Duke of Normandy as well. So I was the son of the great Viking Rollo, his youngest son. And I have memories from that. And I was able to prove that to myself. I couldn't believe it at first. I'm like, really? Because I was having the recurring dreams again, and with this lifetime. And my father had sent me over to Northumberland to guard a piece of land and to hold that property. So that was my job there. And the Danes had come over, and I hadn't been given any training, and I just I had a sword, a spear, leather clothing, my helmet. That's it. So, and that's all I came across with. I lived off of rabbits with my spear, and I cooked them and all that. And that's pretty much what I did. And I remember the Danes coming on shore, and they all had small overhand weapons they would prefer to attack with, and they always attacked 3-on-1. So I took the high ground. I actually walked up on these rocks, and they come up to get me. And I took my sword, and as they were bringing down their weapons, I blocked with my sword and then cut across all of them and killed them all. And I was like, wow. That wasn't what I thought I was going to die here. And and they kept coming, and I would be disappointed when they weren't coming because I'd always win my battles. And then I end up actually conquering a great deal of land. I actually conquered all of England long before William the Conqueror did. But I decided not to stay at England. I was tired of England. I wanted to go home, so I didn't stay. I went back to France. And how I knew, I knew exactly where my father's castle was. So I, like the blank map of France, I put my finger, exactly knew where home was, put up a map of France, exactly where I put my finger is William the Conqueror's, or Rollo's castle, right? The very, Rollo's castle, the castle that William the Conqueror would have lived in, right? That line would have all lived in that castle. That's exactly the castle. And back at the time, it was new at the time, right? So it was built around the year, I was born around the year 900. And I also remember getting stabbed because, of course, when I got over there, this one thing they can't figure out in history, but I know the answer to. So when I got back to home, and I was with a group of guys, right? I just had a small group of my best guys. And I had a guy named Beowulf, who was kind of like my right-hand man. He was Klaus in World War II. Came back, my best friend. So he's next to me, and I see all these guys running towards us, and a lot of them are on horseback. But they're other Normans. And history talks about a rebellion that William Longsword had to put down. They called me, and later on in history, they called me William Longsword. At the time, I wasn't known that. I was known simply as Eric, son of Rollo. So I said, yes, we're going to fight. And he said, but there's more of them than there are us. And I said, that's fine. We are the better fighters. We will win. And I turned to my guys and said, I need each of you to kill 3 men. And me and Beowulf, I say, we're going to charge into battle on our horses. We're not going to get off our horses and fight. We're going to charge into it. So we both charged into the battle. Like, cavalry charges did not exist at the time, to give you an idea. So we charge into the battle. We each kill 3 men. My guys that are on foot kill 3 men. And they start turning and running. And I know I'd won a big divisive victory. And I'm like, and I just had my chainmail. And I was like, at the time, I was like, shit, I don't have my armor. Crap. I just had my chainmail. But we won, right? I won that battle. And after I got home, right, and I started living, and I had married, had kids, there was the Duke of Flanders, not the Duke, but the Count of Flanders, kept harassing the Normans there. He wanted to eliminate as many Vikings as he could. And I started raiding his estates. So I started raiding, burning his estates. So his name was Arnulf, Arnulf. He spoke mainly French, but he was killing my guys. And he kidnapped Beowulf. I rescued Beowulf. And Arnulf agreed to terms of peace. So I followed the rules of peace, which when you show up to a peace negotiation, you carry no weapons with you. You come, you sit down to negotiate peace. I sit down to negotiate peace, and a bunch of guys just jump out and stab me to death. And that's how history actually records how I died. Right, so I stabbed to death, and they know where I'm buried, right? I know where I'm buried today. I know the church where I'm buried. Of course, my body's been moved because I keep moving people all the way to put somebody else there, right? But Beowulf, he avenged my death and took Arnulf out. And Arnulf came to me in this lifetime in a dream on fire, begging for my forgiveness because he was burning this entire time because of the guilt. and for everything that he did. And I said, okay, I forgive you. And then when I said, I forgive you, his fire just went out.
Wow.
So he's in a better place. And it's like, that's what, like why I think this is my last lifetime. You know, I think of probably moving on to something else, because all these people from past lives coming forward, right, wanting closure, basically. With
Right.
you have sons coming, you know, formal sons, right? King Henry the First, apparently I was his mother. I don't remember that lifetime, but he said I was his mother. I'm like, okay, son. He says, I still love you. I'm like, I love you too. You were the quiet son, and you got to be King of England. So, you know, that's kind of like I just have this vague memory of him. But,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that's definitely interesting, especially like with the things that we've been told. I would say, yeah, I would say based off what we've been told versus what you're hearing, that's very likely possibility.
Right.
But wow, yeah, this whole episode has just been nothing but interesting. Like I honestly wish we could sit here and just talk forever. Unfortunately, we're kind of coming to
Yeah,
the end
you
of
can. All you
our
have to
time
do is
here,
just,
but
if you want a session with me or anything like that, you just Google Angela Boley, Psychic Portrait Artist. My Facebook page and my web page come up. And I'm also in a show called RuneSpeak and Paranormal Within. And they're Monday night at 8 and then also Thursday night at 8. But certainly you can message me through my website. You can leave a message on Facebook, but you have to Google me, because Facebook shadow banned me and has shadow banned me for a very long time. Wow. And regardless of that shadow banning, my followers keep growing because spirit is at work. Right.
right.
So, but you have to do it through Google. You have to search Angela
Right.
Boy Psychic Portrait Artist, find my Facebook page.
I'm excited because I'll actually get to meet you in person here in April when we go to Waverly.
No, she's not going to Waverly. That's our 9 o'clock show that's going to Waverly.
Oh, sorry. Doing 2 different podcasts today.
I hope I get to meet you maybe at down there at Lancaster at the Porkhouse in Lancaster.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Sanitarium. Might meet down there.
Yeah.
Or because I'm there. I love going there.
We'll definitely get something scheduled.
Yes, we do.
That'll be an absolute.
Or even the jail, or I mean, there's places here in Ohio. Absolutely, I would love to meet you in the. I would love to meet you, and we could talk for a long time.
Absolutely.
but I love being in an investigation too, especially with other psychics. Like me and Chris, right? You put us together on an investigation. It's like psychics amplify each other. It's. You know, and you can validate things because we will both also get the same thing. So,
and you know, speaking of, have I talked to you about August 8th yet?
No, you haven't.
Well, I'm talking to you about this now, so hopefully this date is open for you. I am having our first ever psychic fair and investigation at FCI. So I am handpicking 4 other psychics to go alongside myself. We'll have a structured psychic fair during the day where people can come and get readings. And then at night, there'll be a ticketed event for people to come and investigate with the 5 psychics. I would love for you to be a part of that event. That's Saturday.
I would love to. My August 8th is open. So
I love that you know that just off the top of your head. This is so meant to be. That will be an all-day, all-night event. Like the psychic fair will be in the afternoon. The investigation will likely go till 4 in the morning. Not that you have to stay till 4 in the morning, but
awesome. I
would love for you to be a part of that.
I'm excited already. Yes. I love the responses I get there, especially there's a guy that speaks, there's a spirit that's speaking Irish Gaelic there. I keep running into. He likes to talk to me, and I don't know a thing of Irish, so something else I got to look up in the meantime.
I've got something to do between now and then.
Yes. Perfect. Pick up another language in between now and then, right? Try to.
Right.
At least find a really good program that interprets Irish Gaelic really nicely.
Right.
Right.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely get
along that can do that. So August 8th, I'm looking forward to that. But remember, you can just Google me, Angela Boley, Psychic Portrait Artist. You can send a message to me on Facebook or send me an email. I'll be glad to talk to you. And
we'll definitely we'll definitely get something set up so that way we can do an investigation or something. Yeah, we'll get this set up because I have just lots of things I think would be interesting for us to collaborate on. So that would be cool. So yeah, definitely
Absolutely.
keep in touch.
Absolutely. Keep in touch with me, and I appreciate this opportunity. And then I'm going to see you again, hopefully at 9.
Yeah, our 9 o'clock show is live. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome.
feel free to.
Looking forward to that.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Well,
All
thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful, both of you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much.
See y'all next time.
See ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye bye.